temperature looks good.
Doubling up. Roger roll with planet. Water tower, fly! Flight downside of speed off.
Yikes. You bet. Okay. We don't need any more of these.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Port Canaveral, where we are standing by for our first views of a Falcon 9 first stage on board Of Course I Still Love You, which is about to enter Port Canaveral, coming back after launching the latest Starlink mission. And this is the new fleet leader, the booster 1049, finished its 7th flight. New record for SpaceX Falcon 9, and we are going to see that booster come back into port to be prepared for yet another mission later on this year or next year or so. But welcome to NSF Fleet Cam at Port Canaveral at Rusty's Seafood and Oyster Bar. We are going to be using Fleet Cam to get a view of that booster today, and that booster is on its way into Port Canaveral. We'll see it in just a couple bits. In fact, we're starting to see it at the very right-hand side of the screen, I think. My name is Thomas Burkhardt. I'm an editor and reporter for NASASpaceflight. In the studio, I'm joined by Michael Baylor. Michael, how are you doing?
Good. How's it going, everyone?
And we've also got Julia Bergeron, who is actually out at Port Canaveral. She'll be taking some photos and stuff. I'm not sure if she'll say hi to us right away, but she is here as well. And she'll be able to help us answer all of the questions because, of course, she is the one around here that knows everything about the SpaceX fleet. Photographer for NASA Spaceflight. And if you have any questions for her or for any of us, feel free to put them into chat and tag us with @NASA Spaceflight. That'll help us see them better, and we will try to answer as many of them as we can. But like we said, this booster did just launch the 16th Starlink mission, or the 15th operational version 1.0 batch of Starlink satellites. That launched just earlier this week. And the first stage landed on Of Course I Still Love You, downrange in the Atlantic Ocean. And that drone ship with the Falcon 9 booster is being towed back into Port Canaveral this morning. I do believe we've seen the pilot boat go out to the drone ship, so they are getting close to entering port. Julia, do you have any updates on where the drone ship and the booster are right now? I heard her on comms briefly for a second there.
I do. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Julia. How is it in Port Canaveral this morning?
It is a beautiful morning in Port Canaveral, and you are about to see a very scorched booster. I know that we said sooty, and that's going to be a point of contention for most of us, at least between me and Michael. But this is a scorched booster because it has gone 7 times to space and back, and it's a beautiful morning here, and I can't wait for you guys to see it down at Rusty's. It is a little bit darker than the 6th time we saw it come back, so it'll be fun.
This will be the scorchiest booster ever. 7 flights under its belt now. And we know that SpaceX CEO Elon Musk has said that these boosters are definitely, or hopefully, supposed to be able to fly about 10 times before they need really major maintenance going forward, although they should be able to fly even more than that afterwards. So we're really not even at where SpaceX expects the sort of end of lifetime for a Falcon 9 booster will be. But this is the booster that has now flown more missions than any other booster. It was tied with another booster with 6 flights. But there you go. You're seeing the first views of the first 7th flown booster. Just coming into view from NSF Fleet Cam. Julia, are you over by the jetty? Where are you right now?
I am still over here by the jetty. I'll have some pictures I'll be posting soon, but yeah, it was a beautiful morning on the horizon with that booster, as it actually was getting pretty close when sunrise happened. So that was our first view as we entered jetty, and I'm waiting to see. Oh, you guys can see the tip of it right now, can't you?
We can
at the
see
interstage?
just the very top.
Oh, you guys are so close. It is interesting to see. I mean, you've pretty much got every scale of gray going on, straight to black. So where the legs deploy, of course, is bright white. And you'll
Mhm.
have people for scale, and Octograbber is definitely being used. And there's no lean to this booster, which is a big change from the
Yeah,
last one we saw
the
coming.
last booster was a lot more interesting as far as lean is concerned, but this one's a little more that booster was only one flight under its belt. This has been a spaceflight veteran, if you will.
Exactly. And it's definitely wearing the marks of being inspected, going to space and coming back. And every trip gives a different set of marks to the booster. And you can see those heritage marks underneath each of the layers. So um, we're starting to be able to kind of tell each booster apart by its
Mhm.
unique markings. You guys are so close. It's such a tease to see just the inner stage over there, yo. Especially when I can see it entirely. So, and Stephen, you guys also have to check out Stephen Marr if you're on Twitter while you're watching us. Stephen's going to have some pictures to upload as well.
Great. NASA spaceflight photographer Stephen Marr also at Port Canaveral this morning then. And of course, you should be following both Stephen and Julia on Twitter if you are not already, sharing photos and other goodness from the Space Coast. So this booster, I'm looking at my, I have a spreadsheet with all this info on it. This has flown 7 missions, 5 of which were Starlink missions, including the most recent one, but it debuted on the Telstar 18 Vantage communication satellite launch, and then flew the Iridium 8 mission from Vandenberg. So this booster is actually launched from both coasts, and then it came back over to Florida to launch 5 Starlink missions, and now it's on 7 missions. And most likely, its next mission will be one of the upcoming Starlink missions. They usually want to take the Falcon 9 boosters that are at the fleet leaders or the life leaders, as SpaceX calls them, since they are really pushing the boundaries of Falcon 9 reuse as they establish, how many flights these boosters can fly. They want to on the, I guess, the highest risk missions. I don't know if that's the right way to say that because SpaceX wouldn't launch these missions if they thought they were significant risk because of how much they were using the booster. But on the first time a booster flies for say an 8th mission, the booster will launch some sort of Starlink mission or some sort of internal payload, which are usually Starlink missions. So this booster will apply some Starlink mission coming up. It usually takes a little bit over a month to turn around a booster for another flight, so it's probably flying in January sometime, maybe. But this booster is helping SpaceX out with their Starlink launch manifest for sure, and helping them get data for other missions. Because as they push the boundaries for Falcon 9 reuse and get more and more flights under these boosters' belts, they'll be more comfortable going to customers and flying those missions on boosters that have flown more and more missions. And it just gives them more data for Falcon 9 reuse, which also helps them with Starship development. So the more times they can fly things to space and back, that'll help SpaceX out a lot. And we're starting to get a good look at some of that Scorch on the top of the sort of main part of the Falcon 9 tanks there. And it is a gorgeous morning. We saw the sunrise photos that Julia was sharing on social media, and it was beautiful out there this morning. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into chat and we will try to answer them. We have a super chat here from Graham. Do we know if all of the engines have also flown 7 times or did they have to replace some of them? So it is pretty hard to track which engines. Obviously, we don't know, the serial numbers of like every engine that is in the SpaceX fleet. There are so many, considering you need 9 per booster. But so we don't know exactly. Generally speaking, I believe the engines tend to stay with the same booster, but obviously they can be swapped out if needed. So um, it is possible that some or all of these engines have also flown 7 times on this booster or on other boosters. It's even possible that some engines have flown even more than that by being swapped in between different boosters. It's also possible that some of these engines are newer and were swapped into the booster along kind of between flights. We don't exactly know. It's hard to track that, and SpaceX doesn't exactly give official information regarding engine swaps and things like that. So we don't know for sure. But it is probably safe to say that these engines have flown more than once. Most of the engines are flying multiple times these days. But we don't know for sure. They do not necessarily keep the engines assigned to the exact same booster all the time. So good question though. And we're starting to see the tugging. Of course, I still love you. What tug is at work today, Julia? Do you know?
That is Tug Hawk. So Tug Hawk is one of the most experienced ones. So it kind of seems fitting that the life leader is coming in with Tug Hawk on, of course, I Still Love You, which is the original East Coast drone ship.
Absolutely. So Tug Hawk tugging. Of course, I still love you. And you can see the full height of Falcon 9 now as it kind of comes out from behind the building here via NSF Fleet Cam. And you can absolutely see every shade of gray from white to black. Very scorched booster, and we can't wait to get a closer look as it comes closer here. And also, I love seeing the humans for scale, the crews on the deck of the drone ship working to secure the booster and everything like that. It's because it's easy to watch these webcasts and kind of think, oh, there's a Falcon 9 booster, it's big, I'm sure, but it's not too big. And then you see people next to it and you realize just how big these things really are. And it becomes even more impressive how maneuverable they are and the engineering that goes behind all of that. I'm going to go through chat and see if I can find some questions. We do have a super chat here from Rob. Thank you so much for the support. Is this at the seafood restaurant? This is NSF Fleet Cam, which is stationed at Rusty's Seafood and Oyster Bar in Port Canaveral. Of course, partnering with us to bring you this live views of Port Canaveral 24/7 now since October. There is also another stream on the NSF YouTube channel that is live 24/7. You see the same views that we're seeing right now, and of course, we have people in the studio who can pan, tilt, zoom the camera, as they say, to see different things. And but even when we are not doing a live commentated stream like we are doing right now, we keep the camera pointed at something interesting in port, either the boat sitting there or if there's a booster in port being processed. We have live views of that 24/7. So if you're ever in the mood to see some Port Canaveral goodness, feel free to just hop on over to the NSF YouTube channel. And there is the 24/7 Fleet Camp stream. It's still in alpha. We're working on, well, I say we, mostly DOS these days is working on making sure that feed gets nice and stable and working on learning new things with the camera and all that stuff. But it has been live 24/7 for over a month now, coming up on 2 months actually. So um, yeah, so thank you so much to Rusty's for their support in making Fleet Camp possible. It's an awesome thing to have, especially because we have Julia and Steven down at Port Canaveral and they're taking photos and things like that. I am no longer in Florida. I have traveled home to be with some family for the holidays, so I don't have the live stream kit out there this morning. I'm helping out from home in the studio, so Julia and Steven are out there being able to take still photos that they'll share on social media, and I'm sure we'll be able to show on stream when they do that. And but we have FleetCam there to offer the live video feed for these live streams, and we definitely wanted to stream this booster coming back because it is a record-breaking booster for SpaceX. So. Another question here from Philip Moyer with a super chat. Thank you so much. Do we know how many times SpaceX intends to refly a given booster before retirement? So we don't really know the end number. We do know that at least Elon Musk has said that a Falcon 9 should be able to fly 10 times with the sort of minimal refurbishment slash maintenance slash inspections, whatever you want to call it, between flights that they're doing right now. They should get about 10 flights that way, and they said after the 10th flight, some more major refurbishment might be needed as a sort of major uh, overhaul of the booster before its 11th flight, but it should be able to fly then again. And I think at one point he said, these boosters should be able to fly 100 times before like needing to be retired. And that, no, I mean, the Falcon 9 booster should never really reach that many. By the time any Falcon 9 booster, even this life leader, reaches the possibility of a 100th flight, the Falcon 9 fleet will probably all have been retired in favor of their next generation Starship vehicle. That it'll take a while to fly that a single booster that many times. So I don't know if we'll actually ever see a booster retired due to it reaching the end of its lifespan, as far as being able to support missions again. They will have to do more extensive refurbishment after a 10th flight, however. At least that was the plan a while ago. It's been a while since we've heard new information. It would be interesting to see how Elon and the SpaceX team think about this now that they're getting more and more data from these boosters that are flying more and more often. But yeah, really don't think we'll actually see a booster be retired for that purpose. I think they'll start the reason they'll start retiring Falcon 9 boosters is that they literally don't need them anymore because Starship is coming online and they're using Starship and super heavy vehicles instead. Um, Again, major refurbishment after a 10th flight is, I believe, the plan, but that doesn't mean it'll not stop. It'll keep flying after that. So, good question. Question here in chat from Jim. Does booster retirement mean burial at sea? SpaceX did used to, so when they were transitioning towards the Block 5 boosters, which are the ones they use now, the latest version of Falcon 9, which was upgraded and designed to really be able to be reused easily, which they're proving now, considering this booster has flown 7 times. When they had the old Block 3 and Block 4 Falcon 9 boosters, the older versions, as they were making that transition and they wanted to retire all of the older boosters, and this is also the oldest booster in the fleet, unsurprisingly, booster 1049, the oldest Block 5 booster that is still flying. And obviously that makes sense as it has also flown the most often. But the old boosters, the way they would retire them is simply not land them after a mission. They would fly a second or third mission or whatever, and just instead of making a landing attempt, they would take off the landing legs of the booster, take off the grid fins because they want to save those kind of components, and give the booster, make it a little lighter, give it a little extra performance for its final mission. And then sometimes they would actually do the landing burn still. The Falcon 9 would, just to kind of get some data, but they would do like a soft splashdown in the ocean, and the booster would be expended like pretty much any non-SpaceX rocket. Although Rocket Lab's starting to recover their first stages, and let it descend into the ocean. They usually recover any major debris that survives that, just for sort of responsibility, making sure you don't just leave a giant Falcon 9 booster floating in the ocean. But yes, that is a way that they have retired boosters in the past. But like I said, I'm not sure they're really going to do that with these Block 5 boosters for a while. Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy fleet will, of course, stay active long past the operational debut of like Starship and Super Heavy. But once they are ready to transition all missions to that next generation vehicle, the Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy fleet will no longer be needed and be retired. And they could, of course, do that via that same method of just simply expending the booster at the end of its mission. But we are a ways away from that, of course. Starship's still early in development, and even it'll take a while for it to become operational enough where it can replace all of the Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy missions, especially the commercial crew missions, because Starship would need to be crew rated and all that stuff. But yes, that a burial at sea is certainly a way SpaceX has retired things in the past, but it'll be a while. A couple people talking in chat about some other booster assignments. If you are following the most recent booster return, the Falcon 9, which launched the Crew 1 mission, that booster will indeed fly the Crew 2 mission next. NASA has kind of got that booster to themselves for a bit. And that's not totally uncommon during the CRS missions. NASA like to fly 2 missions on the same booster for CRS missions. And that's just because NASA is kind of involved in all of the inspection processes for getting these boosters ready for flight, and so they're very familiar with a particular booster, and they're confident that it can support their missions versus a booster that was prepared for like a commercial mission or for a different customer. So yeah, the Crew 1 booster will fly the Crew 2 mission. Similarly, the booster, and I got to pull up my spreadsheet again so I get the number right, but the booster that flew the most recent GPS satellite mission for the Space Force will also fly the next GPS mission, and kind of for the same reason. That booster was Booster 1062, launched the GPS-3 Space Vehicle 4 satellite, and we'll launch the SV-05 satellite as well, which I believe is slated for later next year. And also we heard that the Sentinel-6A booster 1063, which just launched from Vandenberg, will also launch NASA's next mission from Vandenberg, which is the Double Asteroid Redirect Test, the DART mission, launching from Vandenberg next year, next summer, I believe, in July. However, they didn't say that that would be the next mission. That's not a super, like, that's a pretty standard mission. It's not a crew mission or a high priority national defense mission, although it is a NASA payload. So I'm not sure if they're going to fly other missions between the Sentinel mission, which just launched, and flying DART, but we know that booster is slated to fly the DART mission eventually. So we actually do know some of the future assignments for missions that are coming up. The next Falcon 9 flight is the Cargo Dragon CRS-21 mission, no earlier than December 5th, I believe, launching from Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center. That mission will launch on booster 1058.4, the fourth flight of a booster. No CRS mission has flown as anything more than a 0.2 to date, so that'll kind of be a new record as far as reused boosters on CRS missions. We know NASA is kind of getting more comfortable with flying missions on more and more reused boosters. Not that they haven't been doing that, but they have approved Falcon 9 boosters on crew missions, flying reused Falcon 9 boosters, excuse me, on crew missions. So they're definitely getting more comfortable and liking the idea of flying the flight-proven hardware, and they're demonstrating that with the CRS-21 mission coming up as well. Again, continue to tag NASASpaceflight in chat if you would like your question answered. It helps us see us a little better. Here's a question for Julia. Is it known why they sometimes fold the legs of the booster while it's still on the drone ship versus taking it off the drone ship onto the stand in Port Canaveral on the docks and folding them there? Julia, do you know what kind of determines how they handle that booster processing when it comes back?
Well, that's still something I'm actually trying to figure out all of the criteria for, but there's a few things. One of them is it needs to be a booster numbered, I believe, over, I think it was 48. There's something about maybe how the octograbber latches on that might have been included in some of those newer boosters. With that being said, it could also do with, like, our last one was a leaning booster, right? And octograbber couldn't even hold on. They needed chains to assist it. In that case, without full contact, they can't use octograbber to do it on the drone ship, so they have to swing it over to the stand. Other scenarios could also be just when they know there's going to be bad weather, and it's safer to move it over to the stand than be on the drone ship if it may be sitting in port for a duration of a week or longer until they wait for winds to die down. So,
Gotcha.
you know what? Basically, there is no really good answer for that one yet. I don't even think Gavin's quite figured out the criteria over at SpaceXfleet.com. There just doesn't seem to be a set pattern for it quite yet. I think as we see these newer boosters in the fleet become more veteran, maybe there'll be some more consistency to it.
It will be interesting to see, and we'll have to see if this is the oldest booster currently active in the Falcon 9 fleet, the oldest flying booster. There are the Block 5 booster started with booster 1046, but 1046 was used on the in-flight abort test, and of course that booster during the abort test, as expected, exploded, so not flying anymore. And then we have the booster 1047, which last flew the Ammo 17 mission. That was an expendable mission. And then we have booster 1048, flew on the 6th Starlink mission. That was its 5th flight and was destroyed during that mission due to a failed landing attempt. So this is booster 1049, the oldest self-flying Falcon 9 booster. So it'll be interesting
You know
to
what?
see.
I want to say, I bet you this one goes to the stand because I think the cutoff might have been booster 1050.
Okay.
So we'll see if this one swings right over to the stand in the next day or so. then I think 50 was the cutoff for compatibility with the upgrades on, of course, I still love use Octograbber, and then the new Octograbber that's on just read the instructions. So I think with knowing that this booster is in good condition, it's not leaning, it doesn't appear they use the crush core, it would technically meet criteria you would think they could do it on the drone ship. So if it's swung over, I bet you as a life leader and the oldest one, this is probably the last one that can't do that.
That would certainly make sense. And Booster 1050, the one you think is the cutoff, that was used on the CRS-16 mission on its very first flight, and that was that mission that during the return to launch site, I'm forgetting exactly what the cause was, but that was the only failed return to launch site landing ever for SpaceX, and so of course that
Grid fin
booster was.
hydraulic issue.
Oh, that's right. It was the grid fin hydraulic thing. So.
Oh yeah.
So so maybe if the booster 1050 is the cutoff, this is actually the only booster that can't be processed on the drone ship. But we'll have to stay tuned. And of course, FleetCam will have views of all of the booster processing for this Falcon 9 booster. So we'll keep an eye on that and see if we can learn some more about that. So Sims Up, thank you for the question. And I'm getting Twitter notifications on my phone. I believe Julia is posting some images to social media.
Well, I'm having SD card reader trouble, so maybe that's Steven. I mean, I did post the selfie, which is not a selfie because
I saw your selfie.
I needed help. I needed help.
Yeah, you can't do the
I only have
selfie
2
when
hands.
it's more than 5 flights because you need both hands to hold up the fingers.
Bingo. So thanks to John Krause, I got a little help from a friend there.
Shout out to John.
So yeah, stay tuned for Steven's photos as I figure out my own technical issues, apparently.
All right, I'm going to keep my eye on Twitter to see those. And we'll try to show them on stream. So, Michael, will we be able to show tweets on screen?
Just tell me which ones you want, and I can put them up.
Okay, I'll link them in our back channel when they come up. So we are seeing right now as the booster kind of disappears briefly behind another ship. That looks like one of the Dragon recovery ships. Do you know, Julia, which one is between Rusty's and the booster right now?
That one's Go Navigator.
Okay.
I believe Go Searcher, after the booster is birthed, y'all might be able to see Go Searcher probably at the north end of the docks, and it, I believe, still has the fairing half that they were.
Oh, that's true. It just came back with the fairing from this mission, so
you
they're going
bet.
to be offloading that. And so Michael is going to zoom past Go Navigator to get a good view of those grid fins. I remember we saw lots of onboard views from the recent Sentinel-6A mission, and it's always cool to see the grid fins in action. They are really the force that drives these boosters home. Here's a question from Alan. Julie, this is a good question for you. How fast can the drone ship travel in the ocean on the way into Port Canaveral?
On the way into Port Canaveral?
That is the question.
Well, so what you're looking at right now, if you give me just a second, I will pull up marine traffic. And I can tell you exactly how fast it's moving as you're seeing it. So their speeds vary over, like this morning as they were approaching Jetty, before they were within our view, they were going about 3.1 knots. And right now they are past the breakwater at Jetty, and currently Hawk is going 1.6 knots. So we don't create wakes in Jetty for multiple reasons. One of them being dolphins, dolphins, sea turtles, and just for safety of boats passing through. As you can see, small craft have been passing in and out of Jetty and the port as this hardware is actually arriving. So 1.6, that's pretty accurate. Once they hit the breakwater here, if you're a fast boat like the Sisters Mystery and Mischief, you can hit the gas, hit the throttle, and get gone right about where the Navy docks are. Now, Hawk goes a little bit slower at sea than a tug like Lauren Foss or Finn Falget, and that's just due to its size. Normally, Hawk is it's kind of in its home right now. Normally, Hawk would do work like port tenders, and they'd be doing the work of what the escort tugs are doing right now. In this case, they are powerful enough to assist this drone ship to and from the landing zone. They just have to do it a little bit slower than those larger tugs. So you'll see on average between 5 and 6 knots instead of like 7.5 to 8.
And so it usually takes to go to and from Port Canaveral from the landing zone. At least, and it depends obviously where the landing zone is for these Starlink missions. It usually takes about 3 to 4 days to go one way or the other, right?
Yeah, and that's with good weather, right?
Right.
Because we've seen just how much weather can impact the fleet. This was a pretty average, this was a pretty average to and from. It was a little rougher going out for them, I believe. Coming back, though, we're pretty much on par. The trick is they can only enter Port Canaveral during daylight hours for safety. So they kind of slowed down a little bit overnight so that they'd, for the most part, be able to just glide into port at sunrise. Sometimes we'll see them actually stay out near the anchorage, which is just over the horizon line. And we'll see them stay out at the anchorage overnight and then inch forward in the morning before the other tugboats go out to meet them.
We're getting some great views as Michael with fleet cam pans down the booster. Super scorchy booster.
And when I was looking on my camera views, I was actually rather challenged to find the 4.9, at least on the grid fin that was facing me. So it'd be interesting to see what everyone gets. Unfortunately, y'all gonna have to wait a little longer for views from my camera. When I get to work, I'll get a new card reader because mine seems to have died.
You can see on the booster there are lots of lines in the Scorch patterns. That is, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, where the SpaceX crews have cleaned off some of the Scorch and cleaned off the booster a bit and kind of polished it up in order to inspect different weld lines and things like that, part of their between flight inspections. So that's why you can see some lines across the booster that are not as scorchy because SpaceX has worked on those areas of the booster. And of course, you can see the part of the booster that is protected by the landing legs during reentry, where the legs are folded up against the rocket. Those parts are also pretty clean and white because they're not actually exposed to the open air during reentry. They're only exposed once the landing legs deploy. So. Mikhail says, fortunately, we don't need a protractor today. That is true. No lean to measure today. 0 degrees of lean. Up is Go has a question. What is the route taken by the booster back to the HIF or the Horizontal Integration Facility, one of the SpaceX hangars? Is it public or private roads? So once it is in Port Canaveral is right by the south gate to Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. And SpaceX owns and uses some of the buildings on base in addition to the hangars at the actual launch complexes to house and refurbish their boosters. So the booster will be put horizontal on the transport that we've seen, the former space shuttle orbiter transport, now used to transport Falcon 9 boosters. They will of course process the booster in Port Canaveral, fold the legs, etc., and then move it horizontally and place it on that transporter, and then it'll go out the back of SpaceX's sort of Port Canaveral area, straight onto the road, and which is initially a public road, but then straight onto base where it will go onto private roads into one of their hangars and get ready to be prepared for its next flight. And those are all roads that are on the Air Force Station. So. That she drives right past where the SpaceX Launch and Landing Controls building is, which is also right next to the south gate to Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. And that's where us media drive in to view launches when they're going from Pad 40 versus 39A up at the Kennedy Space Center. Again, if you have questions, feel free to put them into chat. I'm still going through them and trying to pick out some good questions to ask. Here's a question from Jake. Do we know when the crew boarded the drone ship? So Julia, when do the technicians that we'll get a view of in just a little bit actually board the drone ship to help get the booster ready? We might not have Julia on comms right now. I know usually, it depends on the mission and depends on weather and things like that. The crew will go out on either on one of the tugs or one of the other support ships to kind of meet the booster on the drone ship. Well, actually, hold on, I should back up because when the booster first lands, of course, nowadays they have Octograbber to secure the booster via remote control, but I don't believe that means they don't go onto the drone ship while it's out at the recovery zone to help secure it sometimes, at least if the weather is good. Once the booster has been saved and vented any remaining propellants on board, or at least the liquid oxygen. Kerosene is pretty inert when it's just sitting in the tanks, but kerosene and liquid oxygen, of course, is what produces rocket explosions. So, so sometimes crews board the ship out at the recovery zone to help secure it and things like that. But then they'll come off when the booster is actually being towed back to port. And then once the booster is kind of out, either at the anchorage or getting ready to enter Port Canaveral, we will see crews go out on one of the ships to board the ship and help it be transferred from the drone ship to the docks. You can actually see Ghost Searcher, the other Dragon ship, which still has a fairing on board. Looks like just moving up the docks a little bit, probably to make some room for Falcon 9. And of course, I Still Love You. And you can see some of the technicians on Of Course, I Still Love You there. Some Humans for Scale coming up shortly. And Julia says she is moving to a new area. She lost reception, so we'll get her back on voice in a little bit. But hopefully I answered that question correctly. If not, we'll ask Julia again in a little bit. But there is the deck of Course I Still Love You. And you see some technicians waiting for the drone ship to arrive at its berth in port. We should make that specification. The drone ship does not dock in Port Canaveral. It actually berths to Port Canaveral using the tugs because it's not under its own power. It's actually the same distinction we make when we talk about spacecraft that go to the International Space Station, the cargo and crew vehicles. Of the American fleet, all of the crew vehicles, Crew Dragon, and then Boeing Starliner, dock to the station. That means they are under their own power and control, their own thrusters and things, and actually just dock directly to the docking ports. That also goes for the new Cargo Dragon 2 vehicle, debuting on the CRS-21 mission next month. But the other cargo vehicle, Northrop Grumman Cygnus spacecraft, as well as the upcoming Sierra Nevada Dream Chaser spacecraft, berth to the International Space Station. And what that means is they just get close enough to the station where the robotic Canadarm can reach out and grab the vehicle and move it into position to a berthing port on the station. And that is somewhat similar to what this drone ship is going to do. It's just going to get close enough to Port Canaveral via the tug, actually, so still not under its own power. And then the other tugs around, I see tug Elizabeth S close to our frame there. We'll actually move it to the berthing port, if you will, in Port Canaveral. And that's what we'll see here next as they're getting in position to do that. And you can see in the background, we saw Ghost Searcher, which has one of the fairing casts for the most recent mission. Again, one of the fairing recovery vessels is still undergoing some maintenance in Port Canaveral, so only one of the dedicated fairing vessels went out to support that mission. So they sent out one of the Dragon ships to fish out a fairing onto the deck. And you can see, I believe, the other fairing half in the background at Port Canaveral. You can if you take a close, careful look, you'll see the fairings sitting on the docks there. Of course, SpaceX will soon transport those back onto base as well to be refurbished and ready for another flight. And yes, you are correct. The Cargo Dragon 1 spacecraft, which SpaceX just retired, also berthed to the station using the cannon arm. The ability to dock directly was a necessary requirement to fly crew on Dragon, and the Cargo Dragon 2 spacecraft is just based on the new Crew Dragon vehicle. So, as a byproduct, that means Cargo Dragon 2 can also dock without the use of cannon arm. That means it also can't use cannon arm to berth if it wanted to. It needs to dock directly. Although they still will use cannon arm once Cargo Dragon 2 is docked to the station. They can use cannon arm to reach into the trunk of Dragon and grab unpressurized cargo. The next mission will carry a new airlock for the space station. So they will use cannon arm to reach in and get that cargo out of the vehicle and install it on the space station. It actually comes into play based on which docking port the Dragon spacecraft uses, because only one of them is actually reachable using the cannon arm to grab that cargo. So that's a consideration when they decide which docking port to use on the space station. And if I'm not mistaken, right now we're getting some nice up-close views of the booster, but when we zoom back out, I believe I saw one of the fairing recovery vessels actually let off of its port. It looks like it might be going out for a sea trial or something. We'll check back in just a minute here to see if we can spot that ship going out.
Yeah, chat had asked if they could see the booster number. I was looking up by the grid of fins earlier.
Yeah,
I didn't see them, and now I'm checking the leg area, and I'm still not seeing the number.
because the number is not in the pot that's protected by the leg. It's actually in the part
Yeah.
that's getting really scorchy, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so it's going to become even harder to see which booster is flying these missions. But there you go.
The
One of
fairing,
the
I think it did leave, didn't it?
no, I think it's still to the left.
Oh.
I don't think it left us yet, but it looks
Oh
like it's
yeah, you're
probably
right. There
getting
it is.
ready to leave.
That's
There it
cool.
is.
That's a cool shot.
One of those fairing recovery vessels has been going out like every day to do sea trials. I'm assuming it's the one they've been doing maintenance on. They want to test different things. Michael, do you remember which one this is?
I believe this is. I'm not sure which one this is because they're moving around. I have to check marine traffic. This
Or we could just,
is. It's
zoom in on fleet
mystery.
cam. Mystery, okay. And is that the one that went out on the most recent mission, or is that the one that was still in port doing maintenance things?
I believe that was the one in port doing maintenance things. But I could be wrong.
Okay, so that would mean that they are still doing some.
Julia, you can correct me. Which fairing catcher was out on the last mission? Maybe we still don't have. Oh, here she
Oh,
goes. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, so which fairing catcher was out on the last mission? That was Gomez Chief, because it was Gomez Tree that was blowing up my phone with notifications
Yeah, that's
doing
what I
offshore
thought.
testing.
And
Yeah.
Miss Tree is doing another trial right now. It looks like.
yep,
Yeah, they've been doing a lot of DP testing.
yeah, they're on their way out, and they're actually passing in between where the drone ship is and where the drone ship needs to go. Letting, of course, Mystery is a nice flash ship. She'll get out of the way quickly, but going out for another sea trial now. They've been doing it every day for a while now. I guess testing whatever upgrades and fixes they've been doing in port to make sure she's ready to support fairing recovery efforts in the near future here. I
Yeah.
guess, yeah. The next mission that'll actually need that, they've got the Sirius XM7 satellite coming up. They've got a mission for the National Reconnaissance Office coming up. I don't think we have official schedules for those missions. We don't know which one's next. There's also the Turksat communication satellite coming up, so it could be any of those. Of course, the Cirrus 21 Dragon mission doesn't have any fairings on board. It's just the Dragon spacecraft, so no fairing recovery vessel needed for that. But hopefully we'll see Go Mystery out in support of the next fairing recovery effort on the Space Coast.
I kind of feel a little bit gypped about CRS-21 and us not getting as many return to launch sites as we once upon a time used to
I
get.
know. The CRS missions used to offer those awesome return to launch site missions, but when SpaceX upgraded Dragon, Dragon itself got heavier. It also was able to carry more cargo, which makes the payload mass overall much heavier. And as a result, they need the performance from Falcon 9 to help get Dragon to orbit, meaning that the Falcon 9 actually lands downrange again on the drone ships on those CRS missions, which means less landings here at Landing Zone 1 and Landing Zone 2 at Cape Canaveral. Although the upcoming National Reconnaissance Office, the NRO 108 mission, we believe that will be a return to launch site mission based on the FCC filings and things like that. So we'll still have some return to launch site missions coming up, but not as many as we'd like because those missions are always fun to see from Cape Canaveral. The question in chat here, are the second stages being recovered or do they still burn up in the atmosphere? The second stages of Falcon 9s and Falcon Heavies for that matter are not recovered. They're either disposed of via flying to a sort of graveyard orbit, especially if they're going to a sort of a geostationary mission, or deorbiting and re-entering in Earth's atmosphere destructively and safely. And that is because the second stages don't have any recovery hardware on them. There was talk at one point, in fact, the very early concepts of Falcon 9 had a heat shield on the front of the second stage and landing thrusters and landing legs. That was a very early concept for Falcon 9 reusability. That never came to fruition. At one point, they did want to sort of test Starship reuse by sort of making a mini Starship out of the second stage of Falcon 9. But that was scrapped pretty like a couple weeks after Elon mentioned it on Twitter. Of course, Starship plans and other SpaceX plans tend to change around very rapidly. But no plans to recover the second stages of the Falcon fleet, and that's simply because they're bringing Starship online, and that basically is SpaceX's way of making a reusable upper stage, is by changing the upper stage into a second stage with a payload that separates from it, with payload fairings and things like that, into an integrated spaceship with a payload bay, which carries the payload on board. So that'll be the first time that SpaceX works to recover a second stage is when they recover the Starship spacecraft. So no recoverable second stages right now. And you can see the technicians on board one of the tugs there working with the technicians on board the drone ship to connect up and get ready to berth, of course, I Still Love You in Port Canaveral. Of course, once they do that, they will be ready to either raise the legs on, of course, I Still Love You, or if Julia's hypothesis about this booster being old enough that it needs to go over to Port Canaveral first, they'll connect the crane, swing the booster over, and then fold the legs up at on the port side. You could also get a great view there of Octograbber, which is holding the booster and securing it to the deck as they come into port here. Of course, the other Octograbber on Just Read the Instructions was the hero of the Crew 1 mission. That booster experiencing some rough seas and perhaps a rough landing on the Crew 1 mission, and that booster was leaning significantly all the way on the side of Just Read the Instructions. And the Octograbber robot was the hero in making sure that booster stayed on deck and was able to be recovered successfully. Question from Alan, is SpaceX hopeful they can eventually nail fairing recoveries with the ships, or will it always be hit and miss? So right now, they don't always even necessarily attempt fairing recovery on the ships. either due to weather or some technical issues. Sometimes they let them splash down in the water softly under the parafoils and then just fish them out that way. And they can reuse them that way, but they prefer to catch them in the ships because that keeps them dry and makes them easier to be reused. So I believe SpaceX is still learning some things about frame recovery. Also working on upgrading the ships to make them a little more durable in the rough ocean conditions or for frame recovery efforts. So I think SpaceX is hopeful that the reliability of frame recovery, dry frame recovery, the catch attempts will improve because it looks like they're still working on that. But even if they continue to fish them out of the water, we know they've been reusing them, so we know that is helping them bring the cost and the time to manufacture fairings down because, of course, you don't need to build new fairings if you're recovering them on the flights. So I think SpaceX is hopeful that that will still improve going forward. But it has already proven helpful, so.
We're gonna spin a drone ship 180 degrees.
Oh yeah, they are spinning it. I think we had a hypothesis last time where whether or not they have to spin the ship before it docks is based on which side of the ship the booster ended up landing on. I think they usually spin it so that the booster is closer to port so the crane can more easily grab it. So positioning, of course, I still love you to get the booster off the deck. You can see 3 of the tugs in Port Canaveral spinning the drone ship right now. Because again, you can actually see on the very bottom right that blue thing kind of sticking out to the side. Those are the thrusters that the drone ship has when it is out at the landing zone. They use those to station keep and make sure it's staying in the right spot. And they're powerful enough to stay in one spot and fight the currents and things like that. But they're not strong enough to actually move. Well, they can move the drone ship very slowly, but to move the drone ship a little quicker, they use these tugs to move it around. And so that's what they're doing right now. You can also see, I know on Just Read the Instructions, we spotted some Starlink dishes, which helps them with the communications links with the drone ship and the video feeds and things like that. Do we know if this booster has any Starlink terminals on board? Can we see any?
You know what? I'll take my camera and I'll give it a look-see now that I know kind of where to look.
Yeah,
I can look
They
too.
kind of blend in, really, to be honest. They're not very big.
right.
And depending on how they're pointed up, they're usually closer to the garages, though. Those blast walls.
They do have the sort of dome-looking things, and I know those are different communications sort of dishes, but they're not the Starlink dishes that SpaceX has been adding. I'm looking on the fleet cam view right now, and I don't see any. Although the two drone ships are slightly different in the way that like the cargo containers with all the equipment are kind of stationed. So it's possible they're mounted in a slightly different spot. I think Julia will get a closer look and see if we can spot them. If they are there. We know we've seen them on Just Read the Instructions. That doesn't necessarily mean they're on. Of course, I still love you yet as well.
And I guess they are not spinning it because they've spun it back.
Yeah, I guess they were just positioning it and getting it into the right spot. This one did land pretty close to the center of the drone ship, so might not need to spin it necessarily. If that is the reason that they spin it. There could be other reasons, I don't know. We got a couple of super chats. Future Martian 97, a regular on the streams. Thank you so much. Falcon 9 turning into an Electron with all that soot. They are getting close to Falcon 9 or to getting close to Electron status with the carbon fiber Electron rocket. They're looking pretty close. Thank you so much. And then Dina with the super chat says, thanks for all your work. Thank you so much for tuning in, Dina, and thank you for the super chat. The super chats and the memberships allow us to bring you these streams and invest in things like Fleet Cam, etc. So thank you so much for everyone's support. We greatly appreciate it.
Checking one more time. Oh, there's a Starlink dish, Thomas. Look, it's right here. I see it. Right there.
Oh, I do see it. Yep. There we go. So Starlink dish is spotted on Of Course I Still Love You as well. So both drone ships equipped with Starlink these days.
If you don't know which thing we're looking at, it's that small stick with a UFO on top.
Yeah. We need DOS's telestration skills to point it out, but if you're familiar with what the Starlink dishes look like, it is definitely visible there. And I wonder if that means there's one on the other side there, Michael.
We can check.
Because I believe on Just Researching we saw one on each side of the drone ship. I'm looking in sort of that same spot. I don't know if I see one on the other side.
Yeah, those sticks don't seem to have one on top.
So maybe only one Starlink dish on Of Course I Still Love You currently.
Yeah, I'm not seeing one on the other side. I'm taking some pictures so that maybe I can get a closer view of it with my camera, but I don't see one. At least not, yeah.
Keep pulling on my spreadsheet because people are asking some really good questions. Jack wants to know when the last time when is the last time that SpaceX failed to land a booster? It has been a while. They are on let me see here. They are on a 17 straight successful landing streak as of this booster. The last time they failed was the 6th Starlink mission, which was booster 1048 on its 5th flight. That was the last time they actually had a failed mission. They had those 2 Starlink missions, the 5th and 6th, which encountered technical issues during landing. I know one of them was like a wind issue. The wind data was slightly incorrect and they had to fix that. And then the other one was, oh gosh, I'm not sure I remember what the other one was. But they both had some technical issues that prevented landings. But that was all the way back earlier this year. And since then, they've had 17 straight successful landings. Of course, all of the different Falcon 9 missions at all the different landing sites, the different drone ships and things. So it has been a while, although it was earlier this year, but 17 missions straight now with successful landings. And Rusty came with the super chat says, "Hey guys and gal, nice camera work, Michael. Thank you so much for the support. We appreciate it." And I actually just got a message on our members only Discord. Thanks, Rocket Nerd, for helping me out with this. The other failed landing was when they had that engine failure right before main engine cutoff that we saw. So that engine issue which prevented the landing. So, but again, that was earlier this year, and 17 straight successful landings since then. And of course, and those were on flight-proven boosters. And as those boosters fly more and more often, they'll get more and more data, and the landings will become even more reliable. And right now, I'm looking at my notes here. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 active Falcon 9 boosters. 3 of which are sort of the brand new ones that just launched, the Crew 1, the GPS, and the Sentinel 6A missions. And then they've got 5, including this one, that have flown multiple missions and are getting ready for future missions. Booster 1049 is this one you're looking at right now. Finished 7 missions. Booster 1051 has flown 6 missions to date and will fly another mission coming up. I don't think we know the assigned mission for that booster yet. We also have Booster 1058, which we know is assigned for its 4th flight, being the CRS-21 mission coming up. We have Booster 1059, which is preparing for its 5th flight. Booster 1060 preparing for its 4th flight. And then we have Booster 10, 61, 62, and 63, which have all flown 1 mission each and getting ready for their 2nd flight, the youngest boosters in the fleet. And then after that, we saw Booster 1064 at McGregor, Texas a while ago. That was the first side booster for the next Falcon Heavy mission, the USSF-44 mission for the Space Force. That mission needing 3 brand new boosters. So the newest boosters after that will be Falcon Heavy boosters. So there's a brief update on the Falcon booster fleet. And Karma with a question, what keeps the fairing from sinking before it is lifted out of the water? So as long as it lands correctly, sort of the curve of the fairing into the water, it is neutrally buoyant. It'll sit on the surface. It floats. It's light enough that it'll just float. So it floats kind of on the same principle that any boat would float under, the principle of buoyancy. It's nice and light, and the volume of the empty fairing displaces enough water where the force of buoyancy is equal, and it simply floats on the surface of the water. In rough seas, of course, the waves and stuff can put some water into the fairing, which could cause it to sink, or actually just break up the fairing itself. But I'm not sure I remember that actually happening, at least not recently. But
And
the fairing,
actually,
yeah.
you know what? If you guys pan over a little bit, they just took the tarp off of the fairing half that's on Searcher, and they're getting ready to lift it up onto the transporter. So, or at least, up off the deck.
Yeah, we'll take a
But
look
yeah,
at
there's
that.
some great people for scale going on over there.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think Kyle posted a really cool picture. Like,
There you go. They are taking the tarp off of that fairing right now.
And you can see the other fairing in the background there.
Yeah, the
Oh
other
yeah.
fairing's ready to go. So once they get this one up on onto those stands, they'll probably just go in as a caravan. Oh wait, yeah.
is there another truck?
Wait,
by?
I can't tell. Is there another truck? Can you guys see right behind?
There's
Yeah,
cradles
Yeah.
behind it.
yeah, it looks
Yeah.
like I see those cradles, so it looks like it.
Yep. So they'll save the folks on base a little time, and they'll caravan out together. Actually, they won't even go on base with these. They're more than likely just going to go to the building right behind here, and that is where they've been processing the fairing halves now. So there's a crew. Yep, that building right there. There's a team of technicians that'll be awaiting that, and as they are refurbished, then they're sent back out to whichever HIF has the next payload, or out to Titusville. In some occasions, like for NROL missions or GPS missions, we'll see them go out near the airport there to get put on for a next flight. Now, what we haven't had the pleasure of seeing lately is those tattoos that they get that show whether or not they were recovered in water or if they were caught, because we haven't been able to go out for remote setup now for Starlinks for a long
Seeing if
time.
I can see anything on this current fairing.
Yeah,
But I'm not seeing any marks.
me either. But yeah, it's usually right down there near the bottom.
And this ship that we're looking at right now is normally a Dragon capsule ship, and you can see the big sort of A-frame crane extended out to the side to help them get the fairing off and out of the way. But that is usually the ship that is used to recover Dragon capsules, one of the two. And being repurposed here to go fish out one of the fairing halves, which can just barely fit on the deck of a Dragon recovery ship. since Gomish Tree was in port undergoing maintenance. And Jaco had a question in chat. We were talking about the active Falcon booster fleet. What about the Falcon 9 boosters from the previous Falcon Heavy flights? I'm assuming you mean the two side boosters from the Arabsat and STP-2 missions. They are still hanging around. We haven't necessarily seen them be retired per se. The next Falcon Heavy flight does require 3 new boosters, so they can't be reflown there. And we haven't seen them be repurposed to fly as Falcon 9 boosters instead of Falcon Heavy boosters. We know they can technically do that. Elon has said on Twitter that they can, but we haven't seen them opt to do that. So it's possible that that is a lot of work, and thus they don't really. It's not really worth it. They have enough Falcon 9 boosters to support their manifest. Or maybe they are keeping them as Falcon Heavy boosters to support a future mission. There are some other Falcon Heavy missions coming up that can fly on flight-proven hardware, so it's possible that they're just hanging around waiting for that, or it's possible they actually have been retired and they'll be replaced by the new boosters being built for the USS F-44 mission. We're not sure. And Pink asked with the question, are they building new Falcon boosters or just using the existing fleet? They are actively adding to the Falcon fleet. Right now they are building and testing the boosters for the next Falcon Heavy flight. We know we saw one side booster go through McGregor and complete its testing. The next booster, I think, was spotted leaving Hawthorne by some people and on the road. So that's probably en route to McGregor or might already be at McGregor. That's, of course, SpaceX's testing facility where they test all these boosters before being shipped to the launch site. So that'll either be the other side booster or the center core for that Falcon Heavy mission. And so we'll expect to see one more Falcon Heavy, one more of the 3 Falcon Heavy boosters come through McGregor, and then probably some more Falcon 9 boosters after that.
I
They're getting.
believe I'm checking my notes. Yeah, it'll be a side booster, I think.
Okay. And then, so the second side booster, and then probably a center core.
Yep.
But yes, they are still building new boosters, and that's because there are a couple missions that still require new flight-proven hardware, including the next Falcon Heavy flight. However, well, that's not least of which because they actually don't have any center cores to reuse, because they've been having some recovery issues on those missions, either failing to land in the first place or falling over in rough seas afterwards. So they don't actually have any center cores sitting around, although they do have 2 side boosters. But the next mission is required to have new hardware. But the Department of Defense recently opted to allow flight-proven hardware on their missions. We know the upcoming NROL mission will have a flight-proven Falcon 9 booster, and we know the next GPS satellite will have a flight-proven booster as well. So they are moving towards that. That was the last customer requiring new hardware on their missions. NASA had already approved flight-proven hardware on their missions, including crew missions. So it looks like they will soon not have such a important need to build new boosters as they can fly those boosters on flight-proven hardware. So it is possible we will see a downturn in new booster production, but for now they are still building new boosters to add to the fleet. And the more boosters they have, the more frequently they can launch as other boosters are undergoing maintenance between flights. So. What's going on with the drone ship, Michael? I know we're keeping an eye on this fairing as well, but the drone ship getting closer to berthing.
It looks like they are pretty much tied up now. 2 of the tugs are
Oh yeah,
exiting. Yeah. And they're just gonna go back to those north docks there.
yep, the tug's backing away. So of course, this lovely drone ship berthed in port, and the next thing to keep an eye on then will probably be that crane off to the side to see it picking up the lifting cap, and that'll give us an idea. There's the pilot boat coming back in. That'll give us an idea if they are going to process folding the legs either on the drone ship or lift the booster onto port first. See them lifting the tarp off of the fairing half.
Hey, Thomas, are there by chance any more questions I might be able to help you answer before I sign off for work?
I bet I can find something. Let's see here. Here's a question about the recovery crews themselves. What do the crews of the Dragon recovery ships, and I guess we can extend this to the fairing recovery and the drone ship support vessels as well. What do the the SpaceX recovery crews do during okay, so this is actually specific to Dragon. What do the crew of the Dragon recovery ships do during the long breaks between Dragon recovery times? Because obviously there's only the infrequent Dragon recoveries between missions. So what do the crews of those ships do between missions?
Well, they do lots of maintenance and upkeep on their ships. They also do training with the astronauts and training with like Detachment 3 on base. So even though they're not necessarily on mission, they're always preparing for mission. Right now, we have a Dragon that is actually at the space station, so they are always on the ready in case something should happen and Dragon would need to depart the space station unexpectedly. They would be ready to deploy at a moment's notice.
And I would assume that goes, obviously, drone ships are going out more frequently than Dragon missions because they're used on any mission with a drone ship landing. And of course, the fairing vessels go out pretty frequently. But I would imagine those crews undergoing similar maintenance and training between missions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the fairing catchers, you definitely see like Gomez Tree went out for more DP trials, so they're always fine-tuning software. There's also a little bit more maintenance on those fairing catchers because of the nets and the arms. You need to make sure that at all times all of those joints are secure because you never know when you're going to have rough weather out there. And losing an arm at sea, there's nothing you can do out at sea to fix that.
Right. And Michael, if you actually pan back, I know we were looking at the stand where we think they will bring Falcon 9 if they can't fold the legs on the ship. But right to the side of that, I think I saw the nose of a dragon. Is that a mock-up or do they have a dragon capsule sitting out there?
Um, that looks like one of the higher fidelity mock-ups.
Right. I'm looking at it, and it looks very high fidelity, which is why I'm want to check if it's actually a dragon capsule, but it's probably a mock-up. I know they have them out there for training, like you mentioned.
Right, there is, I do believe one of those mock-ups actually has a door that they can practice a more full rehearsal of recovery when the astronauts are on board, or just for the SpaceX technicians themselves to practice those specific maneuvers. So that high fidelity offers them the ability to run more of a full dress rehearsal before they would actually go out and recover astronauts.
I'm gonna do a quick full zoom tilt up on the entire booster.
Nice. We do usually like to take some clips like these from FleetCam, and we'll take the raw video without the overlays and things like that, and we'll clip those and we'll put them on Twitter or make a highlight video for the YouTube channel. So we like to use these footage for non-live stream purposes as well. While Michael does that, I have more questions. Julia, how long does lifting take for the Falcon 9 now that it has arrived in Port Canaveral?
Well, that's another mixed question because it is the weekend. So a lot of times the same technicians that will ride in on the drone ship when they're at least out on mission with GoQuest, who's now in Moorhead. So crew transfer looks a little different. Sometimes we have technicians who have been out on mission the whole time, and sometimes those are the same technicians that'll process the booster. So they'll give some of those folks the day off, and they'll return the next day. It looks like today we have a fresh SpaceX technician crew. They would have done a transfer out from the tug to, of course, I Still Love You. They did not come in, like they didn't ride in on, of course, I Still Love You and stay on the drone ship until they came back. These are folks who came from one of the tugs that got on at Port Canaveral, went out, transferred on. So this is a fresh crew, which means we could see some processing today, or it seems like lately, honestly, SpaceX hasn't exactly been working on the weekends in port if there isn't a rush to get this booster back.
And really quickly, Julia, you can actually see the booster number in our shot now, just
Oh,
below that
yeah.
crude fin.
Oh, there you go. That's kind of a nice shot there, Michael. You got the two flags, the Falcon, I like that shot.
That's very cool. That actually brought me to another question. We were talking about the recovery crews earlier. I know that these ships are not actually owned by SpaceX. I think, save for the drone ship. But the Dragon recovery ships and the Frame recovery ships are actually owned and operated by something offshore. What's the name of that company?
It's Geis Offshore, which is how we
Yes.
get the GO. Yes, that's GO or Geis Offshore. They are actually a company out of Louisiana. And what they do is they manage these ships and their operating crews for SpaceX. That is more cost efficient for SpaceX, who just owns the actual drone ships themselves that the boosters land on. Even both of the fairing catchers, they're managed by Geis Offshore as well. And honestly, when you get down to it, the cost of fuel and maintenance and all of that adds up pretty quick. And to have somebody else managing that end of it for you, probably comes out better in the end, business wise. Now, there's a catch-22 to this. All of these ships have modifications now that SpaceX has done. So should one of these ships retire from the SpaceX fleet and go off mission entirely, what you see on deck will be stripped so that that ship is actually returned to Geis Offshore in the same format that it was leased out to them in. And if you go to geisoffshore.com, for anybody who's really, really like a fleet geek, you can see all of the specs for the Geis Offshore fleet before SpaceX modifications. So you can see how many bathrooms do they have? Do they have a galley? They do have laundry facilities on board, y'all. These used to be offshore supply ships that would supply the platforms in the Gulf of Mexico. So they can have extra fuel on board to bring that out to platforms, which means could play some interesting scenarios at sea, right? They can be out there a little bit longer with that capacity. It also means they can carry longer duration supplies for food and things like that for the crew.
And so the crews on board those ships, are there Geis Offshore personnel on these ships all the time alongside SpaceX personnel, or how does that work?
So how that works is each of these Geis Offshore ships have 4 to 6 crew members on board, and they live on the ship. So when they are docked at Port Canaveral, that's their home. Now, when they go out on mission, that is when they host the SpaceX technicians who will join them on board. Right now, like I said, GoQuest is actually in Morehead City. Morehead City has been a convenient place for them to dock in between missions. And that means that the Geis Offshore crew, they're still on board, but the SpaceX technicians, if they have done their full mission duration, they actually will leave for Morehead City, and new technicians will go up to Morehead and just board there instead of in Port Canaveral. So they've had that kind of a switch, with Morehead being kind of a secondary port, which means their crew operations will be a little bit different as far as how SpaceX rotates their technician staff.
It's certainly interesting to see, especially the when those crews are standing next to flight hardware, give you that sense of scale. Even these fairings are huge. We got a question here from Ian. How long does it take for a drone ship to get to port after recovery? We kind of touched on this earlier. We were talking about how fast the drone ship actually goes, but it usually takes 3 to 4 days in good weather. Sometimes a little longer. How long? Let's see. How long did it take this one? This mission launched.
Oh, let me look back through my screenshots because I remember. Maybe I didn't this time. It was a night launch, so the next morning they safed the booster, so they have to actually hook the tugboat back up to the drone ship. At that point, they can do crew transfer from Quest, but they wait until daylight because jumping from a boat onto a drone ship isn't necessarily something you want to do at night. And they'll make sure the booster is secure with Octograbber before they depart, and all fuel is saved or bled off. And I want to say they departed by noon the next morning.
Yeah, I'm looking at. I just scrolled through the SpaceXfleet.com. Gavin on Twitter, who always provides these great updates, and it looks like it departed the landing zone by around 1 o'clock on the 25th, which was Wednesday. So
Yeah.
just under 3 days to get back to port for this mission.
And that's pretty standard for the Starlink landing zone. Crew 1 actually was almost 100 kilometers closer.
Mhm.
And that means that they can get back just a little bit faster. Cuts about a day off of there. And yeah, with that being said, though, we had a few problems during that last recovery, so they did not come back any faster. In fact, it was longer than a Starlink mission would have been.
Right. Michael, I just linked you in chat. Our friend Stephen Marr at Port Canaveral has got some awesome photos up from Port Canaveral. I linked you a tweet that we can show if we can.
Yeah, I can do the photos at least.
And I will stand by for Julia's photos as well. I know she was having some SD card reader trouble, but she'll have some amazing photos as well. So if you follow at Julia Bergeron on Twitter and at Space Coast Steve on Twitter, you'll see the NASA spaceflight team in Port Canaveral, along with Fleet Cam. I guess Fleet Cam is part of the NSF team at this point, sharing their various imagery of the port return.
Yes, we actually have a Fleet Cam watermark now, because occasionally, if you're not seeing one of our live views that's screen capped, I'll take an actual photo lift off of Fleet Cam's camera, and bring you an actual photo straight from there, as well as like sometimes we'll actually pull video. We can do the same with photos. So we've given Fleet Cam its own watermark for occasions like that.
We have, and there you're right now on screen. You're seeing one of Steven's photos. Great shot of Falcon 9 in the sunlight as it comes back into Port Canaveral.
With the bird, that is so
With the
awesome,
bird.
Steve. I hope you're listening right now. I love that shot.
There's no shortage of bird photo opportunities in Port Canaveral because there are seagulls everywhere. There's a nice close-up shot of the engine section. Very cool. And you can really see
Very
that
cool
booster
shots.
to space and back many a time.
And on that note, wow, Steven, you brought the pictures today. Wow.
Oh yeah, that's a great shot.
Yeah. So you can see just how busy this little port is.
Yep.
And that's even without the cruise ships, which those, I would say the SpaceX fleet has been spoiled because they don't have to wait for cruise ships right now.
Right.
And the cargo, even that being said, the cargo ships have been a lot slower coming in and out of port with COVID right now. So we're not seeing as much traffic, which gives SpaceX a lot more priority to kind of sort of come and go as they please. And
I think
there are times where we've waited at Jetty thinking they were going to come in at 7:30, and they couldn't come in at 7:30 because there were cruise ships, 3 of them, all lined up waiting to come in, and those have priority because they have passengers who have to offload, and passengers have to get back on so they can get back out. And with that being said, that even delays some of our sunset returns. So
And
we won't have cruise traffic now until at least maybe possibly January. We'll see.
it also helps us with fleet cam because that means there are less giant ships to block fleet cam's view. So yay!
Of launches and returns, yeah.
And the launches and landings you got, or I guess not landings, but although that
Well,
would be
maybe
cool
landings.
when
Yeah.
NRO 108 launches, we will have to see if fleet cam can get a great view of the landing because the landing zones are kind of closer to Port Canaveral than the launch pads are. So it's actually
Right.
if there's a mission with a return to launch site landing, Jetty Park or that area is actually a great place to watch the launch because you'll get to see the landing nice up and close.
Here goes the lift to the fairing. Half.
Yep, there you go. They're lifting the fairing off of Go Searcher, right?
Yes, Go
Okay,
Searcher.
just checking, just checking.
It was Go Navigator that was
Go
actually
Navigator was the one close to us, yeah.
Yeah, the one that was blocking your view as they came in.
And remind me,
Also
which
the
one
one.
recovered Bob and Doug at the end of Demo 2?
It was Go Navigator over in the Gulf of Mexico.
Gotcha.
And they kept that same.
You can see the front tip of that fairing has got some, I don't know if that's Scorch from either reentry or from the actual ascent. Obviously, the purpose of a fairing is to protect the rocket and the satellites on board from the heating and forces during ascent, so they can actually get scorched on the way up if they are flying sufficiently quickly. But don't know if that's that or if that's just wear and tear from splashdown or something. But you can see that the fairing has definitely been to space and back. I don't remember if this was the fairing's first mission. I don't think SpaceX mentioned this fairing being reused on this flight, so I think this was its first flight, but Um, not 100% sure on that. Again, the fairings have serial numbers. We just don't know them. So we use the numbers to kind of track the boosters. We don't have that information for the fairings, or like we touched on the engines earlier. So it's harder to track which fairings have flown which missions exactly. But
Yeah, that's a lot harder to track, especially with us not being able to go out for remote setup anymore on Starlink missions.
hmm,
Because yeah, sometimes those markings could help us determine how many times, or at least you could see some marks from previous flights versus being a brand new, very white booster. Trying to remember. No.
Usually when SpaceX, because like they'll tweet out when a static fire test is complete or when they're targeting a certain launch date, they'll also put like in that Twitter thread, this booster has previously supported these missions, and then if the fairings are reused, they have put out like these fairing previously launched on this mission. So they usually do mention that. So usually if they don't
Yeah.
mention a previous fairing mission, I just assume that the fairing is new for that mission. But I don't know if
Good
that's
point.
accurate.
Yeah. 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 I'm hoping they stay consistent with that. And
Right.
actually, as it's lifting, can you see that? I think what
Oh
is that
yeah,
mark toward the end? Is that a water recovery mark?
it looks like it. Michael, can we zoom in on that maybe?
It's a good spot, Julie. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there's 2 water recovery marks. This was the half that flew twice. The other half flew 3 times.
Oh, there you
Uh,
go.
So this fairing has now flown 3 times. Of course, they will need to add another water recovery mark on this one. But there you go.
I think Fleet Cam's going to be helpful for tracking fairing halves now.
Absolutely. People in chat saying, wow, those fairings are huge. I remember when SpaceX first released their schematics for the payload fairing, like the dimensions, the thing the size dimension that they gave is that they were big enough to fit a city bus. And that was SpaceX's favorite fact about their fairings. So I think if you go onto the SpaceX website, it still shows you like a city bus sitting inside the fairing. But yeah, those things are huge. And they're gonna get
Yeah.
even bigger because they're developing a new expanded, or not really expanded widthwise, but extended lengthwise payload fairings for some national security missions that want even bigger fairings. So we'll see even bigger fairings coming back, and hopefully those will be able to be recovered as well.
Now, here's a question from me. How can you tell which half is the active half and which is the passive half? Is
That
it the
is
hardware that we're seeing inside?
Yeah, so I think, and Michael, if you pan over to the other one, I'll be able to confirm it. You can see some sort of rods sticking out the side of the fairing half that they're lifting right now. I
Mm-hmm.
believe the other half will not have those, and the one that the side half that does not have those pusher rods to separate the fairing, I believe the half that does not have that is the passive side, and those with the rods sticking up are the active side.
All right. So
We'll look
this
at the
is
other one once they've set this one down fully.
Okay.
Yeah, so that would mean, okay, so it's the active one that they have to be extra careful with when they're scooping it or trying to catch it, because that would be the half, although technically you can say they're each $3 million a piece for a
Just
half.
about.
But this one would take more refurbishment if it were damaged upon landing or
Because
scooping
it
for
had
that matter.
Because when we talk about those active systems, we're talking about the parts that actually separate the fairing during launch. SpaceX doesn't, or at least Elon didn't like, and thus the SpaceX doesn't like using the explosive bolts that some things use for separation events. The Falcon 9 stages don't separate with explosive bolts, and the fairings don't separate with explosive bolts. They have these sort of pneumatic pusher rod things. I don't know if they're hydraulic or something different, but that separate without any explosive components. So. Um, and the reason for that is because an explosive component, in order to test the component, you have to explode the device. And once you do that, that device is toast. You can't use it again. So it is more reliable to test systems that don't rely on explosive parts because you can actually test the component and then use that exact same component instead of testing components from the same sort of batch of manufactured parts and using those tests to verify the health of the other parts. We're now looking at the other fairing, and you can see they don't have those rods sticking up. So yeah, the one that was already on the deck ready to go is the passive half, and they just lifted the active half off of Go Searcher.
It's kind of
Very
interesting.
cool.
You would think they would go for the active half on the dedicated fairing recovery ship.
That is true. That is
The
interesting.
guy
Although
going, the guy
the other ship
just
also
climbed in the fairing.
I
Guy
love
just
him
in the
just hopping
fairing.
in there like, hey, well, I guess you got to disconnect the crane somehow, but that's crazy. Well, now that winch though, that hoist is pretty handy on Searcher. And as you can see while it was on deck, it just barely fits there with all of the new hardware on deck for astronaut recovery with the medical bay. It sticks off the deck just a little bit. But that hoist, guys, in a weird way, might almost be a safer way to get it on deck than that net and scooping it. Because you have the ability to, I have a feeling you can kind of control it in a weird way, a little bit more with a hoist.
It's also true that
Um,
even the other fairing recovery vessel did not attempt to catch this mission, so they were both fished out of the water. So
yeah. And I think they did that just knowing that with just one of the fairing catchers being out there, um, it's a little bit safer to just go for the scoop, and not risk having damage to the fairing if there's a miss and the ship doesn't stop in time. Because we have seen that too. We've seen bow-sized chunks out of fairing halves because presumably when it came down, they were just a little bit too far behind it as it fell, and they couldn't reverse the engines fast enough, and then well, you end up with a ship impression. But at that point, when you only have one catcher, it it reduces your chance of being able to catch and scoop. I think it's just the way the net system works. They can do it. You can send one out there. They could technically make a catch attempt, lower the net, and then scoop the other one out. Or maybe they'd have to scoop it first and then lower the other one. But with that all being said, that could also lead to some stability issues if you have to leave that caught fairing up in the net a little bit longer. I really wish we could see those operations out at sea. That would be really cool.
I know. Hopefully, as the catch reliability improves with fairing recovery, SpaceX will move towards bringing us some live video of that in addition to live view of the landing. I know unfortunately the fairing recovery does happen well after the mission. Obviously, they're very light, so they descend slower in the atmosphere, plus they're under parachutes. So it takes a while for them to actually reach the ocean. And so it's usually about 45 to 50 minutes after launch before a recovery effort is actually made. So sometimes it doesn't make sense to stay live all the way till then. But on some longer missions where the second stage is coasting anyway, they have cut to it live after the fact. So
Right.
hopefully, if fairing recovery becomes a little more reliable, SpaceX is able to show a catch attempt live because that would be super cool to see.
Yeah, and if you really look, along the fairing catcher ships, there's a fair amount of GoPros on there, which probably serve the function of assisting as they're trying to get under and catch it as well, but probably just to document the processes,
Yeah.
and give them onboard views from, actually both to Hawthorne as well as the ship. So I don't know, maybe we'll get some fun blooper reel or, success at the end, like we did with those booster ones.
Perhaps how not to catch an orbital payload fairing is coming to the SpaceX YouTube channel soon.
I could think of a few bloopers already. Yeah. Like the oops, we were live and we shouldn't have been live arm catch. Yeah, that was a fun one.
Oh yeah. I know Elon has already promised how not to develop a Raptor engine blooper reels, so I'm holding him to that one. A question here from Ed. What do they use to scoop the fairings out of the water? So how exactly does that work when they don't catch them with the big net?
And Merritt Island, yeah, they were very used to, they blew another one up and they'd put another one out, and a couple days later they'd try again and learn from their mistakes. Engineering, if you don't learn from your mistakes, then it wasn't a success, even if it was a failure.
Absolutely. When the fairing recovery goes, either they attempt to catch and don't make it, or they're just going for a normal water recovery attempt. How exactly does that work? How do they scoop the fairings out of the water?
So there's the secondary nets that's underneath the main net, and that one is considerably smaller. It's, oh gosh, at least half the size. On the side of the fairing catchers, you can see bumpers that are along the edges to protect the fairing from being knocked on the ship and causing gouges. And what they'll do is they get underneath, and so literally they scoop it. Now, I think there's another role that SpaceX technicians play in this. I don't think you can really just throw a net out and expect to fully get under it, like you would with shrimping or crabbing. What you need to do is probably have a couple divers in the water to really get that net underneath, and then they can lift it up with the rigging system, and they can assist it onto stands that are exactly like the ones that we just saw them get loaded onto on the transporters. But I think they need humans in the water in order to execute that. But that's not something we've physically seen yet, an operation we've seen out at sea. They've done a few trials offshore. Video of them offshore in Port Canaveral fully scooping it to see if there were heads in the water or not. So
That's very interesting. That reminds me of the shuttle program where they had the divers go in the water to help recover the solid boosters. They had to bring that, they had a huge device that they would dive down with and put into the nozzle of the booster because the booster sits upright floating in the water when it splashes down. And they needed a device to pump out any of the extra water so that it would become buoyant and or more buoyant and come horizontal so they could tow it back into port.
well, now that's a cool fact. I was just awestruck that those floated, which I suppose once you have that spent solid fuel,
Yep.
you've got a hollow booster.
We just saw they lifted the frame on the back of the ship, which they normally use to lift fairings and or Dragon recovery or Dragon capsules out. So
Because
they are.
what if we don't hit the drone ship with a booster and it doesn't land safely, and now you've got hardware out floating around.
Which has happened before.
A tow system, probably not. Recovery and salvage, maybe. Hard to say. Destroying, well, we know that's happened. So it's just a matter of how do they destroy it, and do you need divers to do it? So, yeah. You know what? I think I'm going to have to sign off, because as I get going to work, I will probably lose reception with y'all. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us from Port Canaveral, Julia Bergeron, photographer and NASA Spaceflight team member, the resident fleet expert, if you will. Thank you so much for joining us today.
And thank you all for having me. Now, remember, y'all, this isn't exactly over. You can always join us over on Fleet Cam and in chat. And that runs 24/7. And it sounds like Michael and Thomas will be staying live a little bit longer with y'all. So thanks for joining us, and thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely. And I think we will wrap up pretty soon, as I think with they completed that fairing lift, and the booster is, and the drone ship is berthed in port. I'm not sure we're going to see a whole lot of activity because they haven't started to work on that booster just yet. So Michael, I think we're thinking about wrapping up the commentated stream for now.
Yeah.
Of course, the Fleet Cam 24/7 stream will still be live, so if you want to stick around and watch fairing recovery, we'll make sure that the camera is pointed at booster processing, and we'll keep an eye out. And of course, if you follow us on social media, we'll provide updates on the booster's processing efforts. But thank you everyone for tuning in and joining us for Booster 1049.7's return to Port Canaveral on Of Course I Still Love You. We also caught a glimpse of Go Ms. Tree going out for some sea trials, and we saw them lift fairing off of Go Searcher from this mission. So lots of awesome SpaceX fleet activity in port today, but I think that is going to wrap up our commentator stream. Thank you for all the questions. Thank you for all the super chats. We really do appreciate all the support, and thanks for hanging out with us this morning. Michael, thank you so much for your help in the studio.
No problem. That was a cool stream. I'm glad we got to see those fairings get processed too. That was a nice bonus.
That was very cool. So thank you everyone for joining us from Port Canaveral. But until next time, feel free to check out the Fleet Cam 24/7 stream for continued coverage of Booster 1049's processing. And stay tuned to NASA Spaceflight YouTube channel for more videos from Boca Chica, Texas, as well as upcoming live streams for the 15-kilometer Starship hop coming up, and future launch streams as well. I do not believe we will have an episode of NSF Live this week today, but stay tuned for future episodes of that as well. But until next time, this is Thomas Burkhart.
We can thank the members, because we're not doing
Of course, we
NSF
want to
Live.
thank all our memberships, of course. Launch directors and flight engineers, especially those people who are extra generous with their support to NASA Spaceflight. Thank you so much. We could not do this without your support as well. Thank you, everyone, though. I think, did I miss anything?
No, you're good now.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the port return stream this morning, and we will see you guys next time. Later, everybody.
Pressure looks good. Following up. Roger, roll, Atlantic. Water towers, fly! Flight outside of speed off. Speed off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.